Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launching of the ASEAN-China Survey 2021 report. Today's launching event is organized by the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia Research and Analysis Department. My name is Stephanie, and I'll be your MC for today's event. ASEAN-China Survey 2021 is a public regional survey study to better understand the diverse perceptions of ASEAN people towards ASEAN-China cooperation. Not only looking at how various segments in ASEAN evaluate the existing partnership, this survey also aims to identify their perspective towards China after 30 years of official relationship. This year, ASEAN-China Survey involved 1,019 respondents coming from all 10 ASEAN member states with different backgrounds, making it one of the largest surveys at the regional level. This year's survey is titled ASEAN-China Relations After 30 Years, Changing Perceptions, Remaining Anxieties, and New Opportunities. On behalf of FPCI, we would like to thank our partners: ASEAN Youth Organization, ASEAN Foundation, Asian Law Students Association, International Relations Institute of Cambodia, Malaysian Youth Diplomacy, New Era University, UGM ASEAN Society, University Malaya, United Nations Association of Malaysia Youth, who have greatly contributed to our ASEAN-China survey. This survey project could not be completed successfully without your kind support and assistance. I also would like to thank all of FPCI friends who have continuously support and help us in conducting this survey project. Now, I am pleased to welcome all participants who are joining us today from all over the region. Welcome everyone to those who are joining us in the Zoom and those who are tuning in from YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today. Together here with us, it is my honor to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Teng Sichun, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to ASEAN. Welcome, Ambassador Teng. Now, let us welcome Dr. Dino Patijalal, Founder and Chairman of FPCI, to give an opening remarks.
Assalamualaikum. This is Ambassador Dino Patijalal, Founder and Chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. Ambassador Teng Sichun, members of FPCI, and ladies and gentlemen, friends of our organization, thank you for joining this launch of the ASEAN-China Survey 2021. Title is Changing Perceptions, Remaining Anxieties, and New Opportunities, which I think sums up very well the state of relations between ASEAN and China. This is the second survey that we've done, and the survey last year was done by FPCI with a lot of interesting results. And this year we are again asking questions to ASEAN respondents with even a larger number of respondents. We have about over 1,000 people responding to questions. There's an angle on comparative perceptions of ASEAN people today compared to the perceptions some 30 years ago. And the survey asks a lot of pertinent questions of the day, on ASEAN centrality, on Myanmar, on geopolitical competition, on perceptions towards China, and many more, right? And I think one of the key findings is that more than 50% of the respondents believe that ASEAN centrality has become even more important in the wake of the intensifying US-China geopolitical competition. So, there's been a lot of work in producing this survey. I want to thank Dr. Sofwan, who is meticulously collecting and studying the data for the survey and for writing the summary and conclusions. I want to thank Calvin Ko, who is directing this public survey, and I'll look forward to reading more into the results of the survey, particularly to understand what ASEAN respondents view China, what are their feelings and hopes and concerns and so on towards China. And I think these are important because ASEAN-China relations is one of the most important relationships for ASEAN, and especially because ASEAN and China this year celebrates 30 years of growing and important relationship. So I hope the results of the survey that we have done, the ASEAN-China Public Survey 2021, will give a lot of food for thought, and will also provide the renewed materials in terms of how we can chart the future course of ASEAN-China relations in the coming years. Once again, thank you and have a good discussions. I look forward to hearing any response to the survey that you might have. Yeah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Dino. Now I would like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Tang Sijun to give a remark. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellency FPCI founder and Ambassador Dino, Excellency DSG Michael Tenney, dear ambassadors, distinguished panelists, friends from the media, and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to attend the launching of the ASEAN-China Survey 2021 report. First and foremost, I would like to extend, on behalf of the Chinese mission to ASEAN, warm congratulations to FPCI on the completion of this report. I also wish to thank colleagues and friends who have long been dedicated to growing China-ASEAN relations over the years. On this special occasion, when China-ASEAN relations are once again the focal point of discussion, I'm happy to share with my colleagues and friends some of my thoughts on what happened to China-ASEAN relations and what is expected to come next. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the establishment of China-ASEAN dialogue relations. We may be surprised to recall that 30 years ago, regional landscape was actually undergoing changes as profound and fundamental as they are today. It was again such a backdrop that the then visionary statesmen and diplomats in China and ASEAN countries started the dialogue process with great vigor and courage. Since then, China and ASEAN have embraced the opportunities of the times and focused on common development. Together, we have found a path of progress in solidarity and cooperation for win-win. 30 years on, our two sides have become each other's largest trading partner, most vibrant cooperation partner, and the most substantive strategic partner. We have delivered significant benefits to the 2 billion people of the 11 countries and made important contributions to peace, stability, development, prosperity in the region and beyond. The history of China-ASEAN dialogue relations might not be the longest one compared with that of other dialogue partners. Yet, the tremendous progress made in just 3 decades stand out phenomenally and is in no way coincidental. And I believe several factors have the most decisive shaping power. The first would be our shared pursuit of development. Both as developing countries, China and ASEAN member states are committed to giving the utmost priority to economic development and a better life for the people. China and ASEAN have long been deeply engaged in strengthening practical cooperation, especially in trade and the synergizing of the Belt and Road Initiative with ASEAN's development plans. Together, we have fostered integrated and interconnected development with our trade volume up by 85 times, and two-way investment exceeding $310 billion in 30 years. The second factor I believe is our shared aspiration for peace. Both China and ASEAN cherish deeply regional peace and stability, a long-awaited reality that hadn't been with us 3 decades ago. Guided by this shared aspiration, China and ASEAN are dedicated to fostering good neighborliness and friendship, properly managing differences and disputes, and jointly responding to traditional and non-traditional security challenges. Together, we have set an exemplary model of relations featuring peaceful coexistence and common development. The shift of China-ASEAN relations from foes to partners is the fundamental dominant that brings the whole region onto the course of peace, stability, development, and prosperity. The third factor would be our shared value of East Asia, featuring harmony without uniformity, treating each other as equals, mutual respect and accommodation, and mutual assistance in times of different difficulties, guided by the principle of non-interference in others' internal affairs. China and ASEAN respect our respective development paths and governance approaches, independently chosen by ourselves. We pursue cooperation that is win-win, accommodate the other's concerns, and properly manage hiccups and that may occur in our relations. Whenever a crisis strikes, we always stand by each other's side and offer big help. It is these shared values that have bounded China and ASEAN ever closer. The fourth factor would be our shared people-centered philosophy. Both governments of China and ASEAN countries uphold the people-centered and the people-oriented approach of governance. Our cooperation aims for one thing, that is to benefit the people, and in turn, the ever stronger popular support is the inexhaustible engine that propels China-ASEAN relations. For instance, nowadays, fruit growers in Vietnam and Thailand that export products to the Chinese market witness an exciting rise of income. Indonesia is exporting to China large quantities of coal, a much needed source of energy in the upcoming winter season in the northern hemisphere. Meanwhile, Chinese vaccines give an enormous number of population in Southeast Asia effective protection against the coronavirus. ASEAN-China Education Cooperation Week and ASEAN-China Young Leader Scholarship, among other flagship projects, are deepening people-to-people connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, at this crucial moment of the 30th anniversary, China stands ready to work with ASEAN countries to further unlock the potential of cooperation, build a higher level strategic partnership, and forge a stronger community with a shared future in an effort to create a more conducive strategic environment for development and the long-term peace and prosperity in our region. Towards this end, there are several priorities that I wish to highlight. First, we need to continue to deepen political mutual trust. China remains committed to the neighborhood diplomacy of fostering good neighborliness and partnership. China always views ASEAN as a high priority in its neighborhood diplomacy, upholds the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, and firmly supports ASEAN centrality in regional cooperation. It is now all the more important for us to follow the guidance from the top level and actively facilitate the establishment of China-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, demonstrating the will for solidarity and cooperation and setting a new benchmark for our relations. To some of my ASEAN friends who are concerned about China-ASEAN relations, China-US relations, let me say a few words. China understands the importance of China-US relations for the region and beyond, has a deep understanding of the mutually beneficial nature of China-US relations and opposes defining China-US bilateral ties as competitive. Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is the request of the 1.4 billion Chinese people, and it is being achieved with an unstoppable momentum. China has no intention to replace or defeat any country or to vie for the so-called hegemonic influence. And our rationale is simple. China knows too well that any such attempt would disrupt or even derail our own course of development. I hope my ASEAN friends would find these words reassuring and thus could be more fair-minded about China-US relations. There are some people in the West that have gotten used to accusing China for the so-called bullying or coercion. As a matter of fact, what they have been attacking is China's legitimate and justified response to challenges against China's core national interest. However, bullying is not in the blood of our Chinese nation and will never be. Second, we need to deepen development-oriented cooperation. China stands ready to focus cooperation with ASEAN on two fronts: response to the pandemic and economic recovery. China wishes to highlight cooperation in trade, investment, digital economy, and green growth, follow through on the upgraded protocol of China-ASEAN FTA, work for the early entry into force, the implementation of RCEP, and conduct high-quality Belt and Road cooperation. Last month, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Development Initiative at the 76th session of the UNGA and called for efforts to speed up implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development so as to make global development more robust, greener, and healthier, and build a global community of development with a shared future. China is willing to work with ASEAN to lead sustainable development, and there is so much we could do together in the China-ASEAN Year of Sustainable Development Cooperation, both in 2021 and 2022. Some ASEAN countries have expressed support of China's decision to apply for the CPTPP membership, reflecting our shared commitment to free trade. It's much appreciated. China will enhance communication and cooperation with ASEAN upon our application and remove those unjustifiable hurdles in an effort to advance regional economic integration and trade and investment liberalization and facilitation. Third, we need to strengthen the regional security architecture. Two security arrangements prevail in our region today. One is the US-led alliance together with its bilateral and trilateral arrangements. The other is the ASEAN-led security mechanism of dialogue and cooperation. In recent months, the US is reshuffling its regional alliance and its Indo-Pacific framework, including through Quad and AUKUS, yet still in an attempt to contain China. Unfortunately, the US has opened the Pandora box of nuclear proliferation in the region, which will greatly undermine the ASEAN-led regional security mechanism and sabotage the regional efforts toward open, inclusive, cooperative, and a win-win security architecture. I believe regional countries have every reason to reject the latest move of the US by making their voice heard loud and clear. To be frank, colleagues, obsession with the tactic of balance between major powers and reticence over big questions may lead to the gradual yet eventual loss of power and centrality. How shall our regional security architecture be envisioned? On a personal note, I believe it shall be one that takes common security and common development as its mission. That is based on the international law rather than rules made by a few countries, and that is realized through inclusive partnerships rather than exclusive blocs. On the South China Sea issue, China will continue to properly manage differences and disputes through dialogue and consultation with parties directly concerned and speed up the COC consultation with ASEAN countries with the aim of better rule setting and order building in the South China Sea. Last but not least, I look forward to the fruitful discussions of our distinguished speakers and panelists, and I wish the launch event a full success. I hope a more active and productive FPCI will contribute more wisdom for the ever-growing China-ASEAN relations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing your message with us. Now, I would like to welcome His Excellency Robert Matthews Michael Tene, the Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Political Security Community, to give his remarks.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, Ambassador Deng and Pak Dino, the distinguished panelists, the participants in this event, ladies and gentlemen. First, my apology that I cannot join the panel due to my previous prior engagement. But I'm very happy to have this opportunity to convey my congratulations to FPCI in particular for launching this very important survey on ASEAN-China relations about the perspective of our people, especially in ASEAN, on how the state of the ASEAN and China relations. I understand that this is for the second time that the survey has been done, but the survey this year is, I think, have a important element in a sense that this survey is conducted right in the year where ASEAN and China is celebrating the 30th anniversary of our relations. So definitely the survey is very, very timely. And I also would like to express my appreciation from the ASEAN Secretariat to China for the various initiatives and the importance that China put in developing various initiatives to bring the people of ASEAN and the people of China closer. So for China to give a priority also for the people-to-people relations or initiative related to bringing people to people between ASEAN and China closer. And this is a very important areas to make sure that our relations is broad-based not just based on political security, government to government, or simply based on economic interest, but instead we have a very comprehensive base foundation for ASEAN-China relations. And the people-to-people pillar is one of the most important foundation of such a comprehensive relations between ASEAN and China. And in this regard, this survey, of course, plays a very important role because the survey can be used as a reference on how our people, both in China and especially in ASEAN, relates or look at the ASEAN-China relations. I think the results of the survey will be very important for policymakers, both in ASEAN countries as well as in China, to see how our people perceive on the benefit or the challenges and the opportunities that exist in our relationship. And in this regard, I would like to highlight also the importance for all of us, both ASEAN and China, to continue giving also importance in disseminating the information about the work we have done between ASEAN and China, both in political security area, in economic area, as well as in socio-cultural area, in people-to-people areas, so that both our peoples, our various stakeholders are well informed on the benefit that the ASEAN-China relations brings to them. And the more people are informed about our cooperations, the more they will provide us with the support that we all need. So again, congratulations for the launching of this very important survey, and happy anniversary also for China and ASEAN for reaching the 30th year of our relationship. And I really look forward for a more and more closer cooperation in the years to come, as well as a more closer relationship at the people-to-people level. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Sofwan Albana, who is our survey project supervisor, to present the findings of the survey. Dr. Sofwan, please.
Thank you, Stephanie. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to be here presenting the results of the ASEAN-China Survey 2021. As already mentioned by Pak Dino, this is the second ASEAN-China Survey. The inaugural edition was conducted and published last year in 2020. And we are aiming to establish this as an annual event, an annual project to understand the trajectory and the development of the perceptions on the ASEAN-China cooperation. But this year is special. As already discussed, this year we celebrate 30 years of official partnership, dialogue partner between ASEAN and China. Let's move to the first page. Yes, so 30 years is of course not a short time in international relations. In the span of 30 years, we have witnessed multiple international events, and for ASEAN and China itself, these 30 years have been very significant. The world is changing, so does the relationship between ASEAN and China. In 1980s, many ASEAN countries have very limited interaction with China due to the Cold War. But now, China, since 2009, is already ASEAN's largest trading partner. And now all ASEAN member countries have substantive relationship with China. No wonder that in this 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China, the officials from both China and ASEAN say that this is a big year with a special significance, as mentioned by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, Wang Yi, who say that this is a big year with special significance. And ASEAN Secretary General Dato Lim Chok Hoi praised the progress of the cooperation between both parties. Let's move. Next. So this survey aims to capture a comprehensive range of perceptions and attitudes towards ASEAN-China cooperation that exist within ASEAN countries' public discourse. So we are looking at the people of ASEAN, since both China and ASEAN are saying that they are committed to the voice of the people. So it is important to listen to them, and one way to listen to them is through this survey. We also aim to provide evidence-based recommendations on the relationship by exploring these perceptions and attitudes of the people in ASEAN from all different segments from relevant sectors in 10 ASEAN countries. So we divided the respondents into 5 categories: academia, government officials, business community, civil society, and students. And the 4 categories, the academia, officials, business community, and civil societies, can be further combined into a category of elite. So we then also compare not only between these 5 categories, but we also compare later between the elite and the students to see is there any difference on the perception between the youth and the established or senior officials who are now involved in the relationship. Let's move. So this year we have more than 1,000 respondents from 10 ASEAN countries. The distribution is still not ideal because Indonesia still accounts for 40%, but we have significant numbers of respondents from other ASEAN countries, and the aim for this survey is to get that complexity and the patterns of perceptions in different segments and in different countries. So although there are, of course, limitations due to multiple factors, which make the distribution is still not ideal, we still think that the findings from the survey will be beneficial. There are also other, in almost all countries have significant representatives of different categories. So we think that it is good to look at the results. Let's move. This is the detail of the respondents. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes, all categories are represented. And you can see the distribution of respondents in different ASEAN countries here. The respondents from Indonesia, Cambodia, Malaysia, Philippines are significant, and we believe that this is quite representative for each countries, and for some other countries the number are still limited, but we still think that it is important to also look at those voices. Let's move. So the on the methodology, the survey, because it aims to capture the perceptions and the attitudes of different groups, so we are doing purposive sampling. So we are looking at different categories and intentionally make a database of respondents based on these different categories, and then we send them the questionnaire. The questionnaire is developed from last year's questionnaire, but then cleaned up and modified to be more accurate. We also add several important points to capture the development. In total, there are 61 questions, and it's divided into 4 sections. The first section is the respondent's profile. Section 2 on the overall relationship. Section 3 on the perception on China and on strategic issues like geopolitical development, and also in the section 4 on the world after COVID-19. The questions talks about different issues from economy to strategic to cultural, etc. Let's move. The details of the questions you will be able to see soon. So since the questions are and the questionnaires are quite extensive, the questions are quite extensive, we are going to focus on several findings that we think is important. The first pattern that is very clear is that the survey identified found that the respondents generally view and welcome cooperation which have direct and tangible benefits, like especially during the pandemic. So on the question on that cooperation between ASEAN and China helps alleviate the pandemic, almost half say that they are agree, and almost 20% say that they are strongly agree. So the positive spectrum are quite dominant here. Similar pattern also seen in the question on China, whether China's support of vaccines for ASEAN COVID-19 response is well-intentioned. While a lot of discussion in media about this vaccine diplomacy, etc., we found that respondents are generally seeing this positively. 42.39% say that the cooperation is well-intentioned, and 16.09% say that they strongly agree that China's support is well-intentioned. Let's move to the next. However, if we look at these different questions, we also will see that there are remaining anxieties, and in the political security issue, these anxieties and hesitance are quite visible. If we look at the question on the satisfaction of the respondents on ASEAN-China strategic partnership, we see that the somewhat satisfied and somewhat not satisfied segments are almost balanced, showing hesitancy there. And also on the question on China's respect to ASEAN centrality, the somewhat on answers was also quite significant, although the confident and the not confident was also quite balanced. Let's move. On the other issues like the consultation on the code of conduct, we also see that pattern on satisfaction, that a huge segment are on the somewhat spectrum, and there is quite a balance between those who see and evaluate these aspects of cooperation positively, and those who look at this negatively. Let's move. And this year also witnessed a very important development in Myanmar, the political crisis in Myanmar. And it is interesting to look at the respondents' comments on that. On the question on the statement that China acts as a responsible ASEAN partner in diffusing Myanmar's political crisis, we also see that the somewhat answer was quite dominant, although this time the not confident answer was slightly higher. And if we combine that with the not confident, it is relatively leaning towards negative. But then on should China play a bigger role, 38%, 38.57% say that yes, and 37.49 say that's not clear, while while 23.95% said no. Let's move to the next slide. Yes, all still on Myanmar. When asked about how should China act related to Myanmar to support ASEAN initiative, it's interesting that many expect China should condemn the Myanmar army and impose targeted sanctions. There are also, but the largest answer was that China should follow and support what ASEAN response and mechanism and processes. Let's move. And there are also important patterns that we witness on the cooperation, which is that the survey confirmed that ASEAN people see that the partnership between ASEAN and China is generally positive. The number of respondents saying that they agree that ASEAN-China partnership contributes to regional peace, stability, and prosperity is getting the most answers from the respondents compared to the neutral and disagree one. Let's move. Now we are moving to the general trends in geopolitics. The survey found that more than half of the respondents see that the US-China relationship is at the state of strategic rivalry and competition. 37, almost 38 of respondents believe that there is tension between China and the Quad, while it is interesting that 40% are still unsure. However, against this backdrop, it is interesting to stress that most respondents see that ASEAN must not side with any of the great power, but keep a balanced approach instead. So this is the largest answer compared to other answer. Let's move. And here are the 5 cooperations that are seen as most satisfactory by ASEAN, by the respondents. Economy, investment, economics are generally, and socio-cultural are generally topping the list, with trade on the first, and then investment, technology, and industry 4.0, tourism, and education. This is quite similar with what the findings of last year, with several slight change. You can see the comparison in the full report. Let's move. And here are the 5 cooperations that are least satisfactory. It is interesting that if we look at the economic and socio-cultural relationship, I mean, like the cooperation are on the top list of the satisfaction, but look at these least satisfactory partnership or cooperation. Defense, cybersecurity, immigration, borders, and transnational crime. I mean, like pretty much related to political security issues, and also at one the environment issues, probably related to many issues like the environmental impacts of the projects, etc. Let's move. But there is also an interesting pattern in the question on what is the most interesting aspect of China for you. if you are going to pursue cooperation between ASEAN and China. Economic growth is attractive, but also the progress in science and technology, like digital, artificial intelligence, or aerospace. Let's move. And now we are moving to the comparison between students and elites. As already mentioned, we look at 5 categories of respondents, and the 4 categories can be combined into the category of elites, and that is to be compared with the students to see the patterns between the youth and the more experienced people in ASEAN. It is interesting to see that generally students are more optimistic. In general, the patterns are similar. I mean, like the distribution of answer are quite similar, but the positive answers tend to be bigger in the student respondents. For example, in the how confident are you that China respects the national unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of ASEAN countries? The number is quite similar between the elites and the students. But if we look at the number of the students, the positive spectrum are slightly higher than the elites. Let's move. This is also on the question on how confident are you that China proactively tries to diffuse geopolitical rivals and tensions in the region. We also see that the students are generally more positive and optimistic compared to the elites. Maybe because that's how the youth think, or maybe because they see better than the elites. We don't know. We will ask the speakers why the students are generally more positive. Let's move. How confident are you that China has good intentions in the negotiation of the Code of Conduct? Again, we see this pattern that students are generally more positive. For example, the not confident at all are quite significant in the elites, 16 or almost 17%, but it's only 11% in the student one, and the somewhat confident one is significantly bigger in the student. Let's move. And on the strategic issues, how the elites see the current US-China relationship, we also see similar pattern. I mean, like between the elites and students. Let's move to the next. It's quite similar pattern. Although students see that the relationship will turn into strategic rivalry in all sectors, bigger than in the elites. Let's move. And this is on the question on do you think that there is a geopolitical tension between the Quad and China? It is also interesting to see that the elites are more sure about this. Let's move. How the elites see state of China, US-China relationship impacting ASEAN. Again, students are generally more positive. Let's compare it with the student. Let's move. Yeah, for example, the students who see that there will be benefit in terms of economy and investment is 36 compared to 30 in the elites. Let's move again. And this is on Myanmar political crisis. The answer is also interesting. This is quite interesting because the while generally students are seeing China relatively more positively compared to the elites, when discussing Myanmar, the answer for play bigger role in solving the problem is bigger in the elites. Let's move. And now we are looking at the comparison of answers between students and between countries. These are the largest spectrums. So the gray ones are the at the response in the not confident and somewhat non-confident spectrum. So if the sum of the confident and somewhat not confident is bigger, they will be in the gray bar, and that is the number is the sum of the not confident and somewhat not confident spectrum. But the blue is where the most answers are on the confident spectrum and somewhat confident spectrum. So we see that Laos, Singapore, Indonesia, and Cambodia generally see this positively, while in Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Myanmar, and Thailand, the more no in Myanmar tend to be more in the negative spectrum. Thailand should be in the blue, I think, because 43 are gray. That means 57 are in the blue. Let's move. And on the US-China relations, the majority of respondents from all countries are generally in agreement in this. But there is an interesting anomaly in the Laos respondents, where around 40% of answers identified the relations as comparable to the Cold War. Respondents from Malaysia feel that the rivalry will benefit Southeast Asia in terms of trade, investment, and technology. Let's move. And this is another interesting pattern in country comparison, where we can see that there are three groups if we would like to group the respondents. The first is countries where the not confident spectrum are dominant. It's in Malaysia, in Philippines, Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And countries with most responses are in confident spectrum, which is Laos and Cambodia. And countries with a relatively balanced view, exactly 50% and 50%. It's in Indonesia and Malaysia. Let's move. And this is on the domestic perceptions on China. In the blue ones, those who see generally China as economic actor, while the gray ones, if the dominant response, see China as not only economic, having economic influence, but also political influence. Let's move. So based on those findings, there are several general patterns that we observed. The strategic landscape is increasingly shaped by geopolitical tensions, but on the other hand, COVID-19 pandemics since 2020 creates stronger demand for cooperation. Although respondents acknowledge the risk and concerns, the ASEAN community, the respondents are generally portrays cooperation with China as beneficial for ASEAN. These anxiety, however, there are several risks which creates anxieties that are complicated by the growing geopolitical tension. Let's move. In the past, China was often seen in the lens of Cold War, but it is interesting to note that that is changing. Most of the respondents now see China as an important partner to ensure stability and prosperity of the region. It is important to stress that people of ASEAN consistently argue that their autonomy and sovereignty is important, but they also expect that China is playing more active and positive role in the region. Then many also see that China is a solution provider for multiple challenges faced by ASEAN, like the vaccine issues, pandemic recovery, etc. But they also hope that China can play that role while at the same time respecting the norms and principles in the region. such as non-intervention and treating ASEAN member states as equal partners. Let's move. It is interesting to see that the political security issue is the issue where anxieties and hesitance still prevail. There is concern about how China is respecting ASEAN centrality. Most respondents believe that ASEAN and ASEAN member countries must not be sucked into rivalry and maintain good and balanced cooperation with all great powers. It is interesting to see that there are also, as we already see the graphs, there are differences between countries, and in the country level, Laos and Cambodia seem to be the most open and welcoming on the relationship with China, and seeing that more positively. Let's move. We also see that economic initiatives and big initiatives like BRI and RCEP are seen positively, but respondents are still not clear on the results of these initiatives. So it is important to ensure that the benefit of BRI and RCEP will be felt more clearly by the people. The pandemic also opens new opportunity for deeper cooperation, as seen in these numbers. Let's move. So based on the survey results, we can see that the people of ASEAN have been moving on from Cold War framework in seeing the relationship with China. In this context, rather than seeing relationship between ASEAN and China as an undivided package seen through a single geopolitical lens, the respondents tend to see ASEAN-China relationship as consisting of different and compartmentalized dimensions. While connections between different dimensions of cooperation are acknowledged, there is a strong tendency to evaluate and develop cooperation in a compartmentalized manner. For example, when they are looking at political security, they are not looking at it as something that is integrally connected to the economic cooperation. So they evaluate that separately. Let's move. So based on that, we believe that people should be ASEAN should listen to its people. So so we develop this recommendation. First is the importance of cooperation on pandemic control and post-pandemic recovery, and then must strengthen the collaboration in vaccine production and distribution, because this is also evaluated very positively and seen as well in tension. In the economic dimension, grand initiatives such as BRI and RCEP receive strong attention and positive expectation, but still no, how to say, because it's still very early, need to be more concrete and clear benefit to the general public. Let's move. The cooperation also, as we see, among the least satisfactory cooperations is on the environment. So it is important to take into account environmental impacts of the economic and infrastructure development, which usually marks the cooperation between ASEAN and China. And then in the political security dimension, which is the most contentious one, ASEAN and China must continue to show their respect to existing norms and principles, such as ASEAN centrality, non-intervention, and respect to sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we also see that there is an increasing importance of digital economy, and there is also increasing concern about cybersecurity if we look at the issues. So it is important to develop cooperation in this issue. Let's move. At the same time, ASEAN itself must show that it has the capacity and integrity to be at the center of the regional architecture. So not only asking other partners to respect ASEAN centrality, ASEAN must show that it has the capacity and integrity to that. ASEAN must maintain positive and balanced relationship with major powers and avoiding being sucked into increasing geopolitical tension. People are realizing that there is an increasing geopolitical tension, and they say that ASEAN must keep its centrality and keep its balanced position. ASEAN and China must invest in the cooperation in science and technology because it's one of the most interesting issue among the respondents. And ASEAN and China must bring the people back in developing more people participation in the cooperation. We also, in the full report, we compare different segments and we see that officials and business are generally more positive, maybe because they are involved in the process, while civil society and academia are generally more skeptical. So I think it is important to put youth and academia at the center of this people-to-people cooperation. So I guess with that, I will end the presentation. Let's move to the announcement. You will get the full report and the data table, so you can interpret it yourself. Later, we will send it to you, to all participants who already register, and we will also provide that in our website soon. But for now, let us listen to the comments by our esteemed speakers. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to Steffi. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sofwan, for your comprehensive and detailed presentation. I believe everyone here cannot wait to hear about the discussion on the survey findings. Therefore, without further ado, it is my pleasure to now welcome and introduce our distinguished speakers. First, we have Professor Ling Wei. Professor Ling Wei is a professor of the School of International Relations of the University of International Business and Economics based in Beijing. Welcome, Professor Ling Wei.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Syariman Lokman, who is the Director in the Chief Executive Office of the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia. Welcome, Mr. Syariman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, we have Mr. Kavi Chong Kitaforn, Senior Fellow at Chulalongkorn University's Institute of Security and International Studies, based in Bangkok, Thailand. Welcome to all speakers. Next, I wish to introduce our moderator who will be moderating the discussion, Dr. Poppy Sulistianing Winanti, Senior Lecturer from Gadjah Mada University. Dr. Poppy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steffi. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. It is an honor for me to facilitate the discussion for this session. Previously, Dr. Sofwan Albana has already presented a very interesting result from the ASEAN Survey 2021. To discuss the findings and analysis of the survey, here with us, three distinguished panelists who are the Southeast Asian and Chinese experts, as already introduced by Steffi earlier. To begin with, I would like to invite each of the panelists to briefly share his and her opinion regarding the main findings of the survey. The survey concludes, as Dr. Sofwan mentioned earlier, that within 30 years of ASEAN and China relations, there has been changing perceptions towards China. While in the past, China was often seen in the lens of Cold War, currently, most of the respondents see China as an important dialogue and cooperation partner. In addition, this is also consistent with the previous survey, 2020 survey, the political security aspect is still the issue where anxieties and hesitance still prevail. In this regard, I would like to give a first chance to Professor Ling Wei to give her opinion regarding these main findings. Professor Ling Wei, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Dr. Winanti, for your generous introduction. Well, respectful Dr. Jala, His Excellency Ambassador Deng Xijun, Deputy Secretary General Team, and Dr. Sofwan, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased and honored to take part in the launching of the ASEAN-China Survey Report 2021. First of all, I would like to express sincere thanks to the FPCI for invitation and heartfelt congratulations for the success of the survey. Indeed, the year 2021 is a significant landmark in China-ASEAN partnership. which not only concludes 3 decades of friendly and substantive cooperation, but also will define the nature of the relationship and significantly shape evolving regional order for many years to come. So based on the survey report, and also based on my own study on China-ASEAN partnership in the East Asian regional processes, I would like to identify 3 Ps, that is peace, priorities, and people. So let me start with peace. 3 extraordinary peace processes can be identified in the region since the end of the World War II. First, the ASEAN peace since 1967. No major conflicts ever took place among ASEAN members since its establishment. Second, East Asian developmental peace since the 1980s as a result of the emergence of developmental states and priorities placed on economic development by national leaders. Third, East Asia-wide regional cooperation and community building since late 1990s, which is parallel to the development of China-ASEAN partnership, largely because major powers have been embedded, networked, and socialized by ASEAN in regional processes. Reflecting on these peace processes, it is not difficult for us to draw the conclusion that ASEAN-China relationship has been a cornerstone in the regional peace process, and will be the key to the long-term stability and prosperity of the region. And why could China-ASEAN relationship become one of the most substantive, despite that China was a latecomer to ASEAN's dialogue relations? Here comes my second keyword, priorities. Based on the survey results, we can find that Chinese priorities in engaging ASEAN, principally trade, investment, infrastructure, economic growth, tourism, education, and so on, and other non-traditional security challenges, rather than traditional security matters or power competition for influence. These priorities largely match the priorities of Southeast Asia. China and ASEAN have been focused on engaging each other on what has mattered most to us. And firmly sticking to such a focus would ensure centripetal forces of cooperation prevail over centrifugal forces of power politics and rivalry to maintain East Asian long peace. And my third P refers to people. I strongly agree with the FPCI on the point that the heart of the relationship should be on the people. As Ambassador Deng said in his opening remarks, China and ASEAN share a people-centered philosophy. Bring the people back, adopting a people-oriented approach, nurturing friendship among young people, I think is fundamental for us to manage anxieties, seize new opportunities, and promote the relationship to a new stage. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ling Wei, for a very interesting remarks. Now I would like to invite Mr. Shahriman Lokman to give his assessment on especially on the main findings of the survey. Please, Mr. Lokman, time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Poppy, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. Very honored to be here. So I'm just going to speak for about 3 minutes or so, 4 very, very quick points, and we can have a further discussion on these points later on. I think, first of all, I was really impressed by how this survey sort of like focused on the voices of the youth, and you managed to actually extract those results and compare them with the so-called elite perspectives. I think it's important to have a very good view, of very good understanding of what the youth think. People change their opinions through time, but it's a nice way to sort of like have a slight peek at the opinions of future decision makers. Second point is that I think this survey went through some really granular sort of details and some quite and asked some really tough questions. I think the granular details, such as what should we prioritize on developments after COVID-19, I think were very useful for policymakers to look at. I would encourage people in the Secretariat, people in regional governments to look at those results. They are quite interesting. And the tough questions, there's certain things that still remain quite difficult for us to talk about when it comes to ASEAN-China relations. And yet this survey actually asked questions about the Chinese diaspora, how China has influence over the diaspora, and so on and so forth. Those I found very fascinating, that the questions were even asked. It's difficult to have those conversations, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, those are very sort of like live issues that we try to somewhat push aside too often. And I applaud the designers of the survey for asking those questions. Third point is that results really demonstrate how complicated the relationship is. I get irritated when people ask whether China is an opportunity or a challenge to ASEAN. It is both. And the results of the survey shows that very clearly. It is both. It is complicated, just like the Facebook relationship status. When you have ties between 10 countries and a big country like China, 1.4 billion people, it is always going to be complicated. Fourth point, I was very surprised. I was not surprised by results about the Philippines, for example. I understood the dynamics going on there. On Malaysia, though, on my own country, I found the results to be very interesting. There was far more anxiety about China than I ever expected. And this survey actually got me to start to question whether my assumptions about what my fellow nations thought are correct. And I'm very thankful for the survey for highlighting those things. Ibu Poppy, we can go into the details later, yeah? And thanks very much. Those are my 4 quick points.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sariman Lokman, for your also interesting observation for the result of the survey. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Kafi Chongkitafor. Time is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I will be also very short, followed Lokman's tradition. I like the survey, and I think no surprise at all, because I think it reflects the positions of young people in Indonesia. Everything is in the middle, not bad, not good. There are some anxiety toward China role in whatever fields, and I think that reflects the realities. I like to point out 2 points, which is very important in any survey. One, there is a trade deficit. The trust deficit occurring, whether it's the elite academics or students. There's this element that the Chinese must pay attention. This is very important because it will determine the trajectory of the future of ASEAN relation. In whatever survey, this element will play important role. And I think next weeks, we will find out whether this trust element will be able to surpass, to pass or not, because ASEAN has to make the decision whether to upgrade China requests for comprehensive strategic partnership or not, or CSP. That is very important, regardless of what survey said, because the elite, the leader, will determine whether the future of ASEAN relation with China will go what way, whether the next 30 years will be full of confidence or not. Actually, I personally would like to see ASEAN-China relation on the 20-year cycle, or the so-called diamond years, from the 1991 to the year 2016. The first 25 years was very good, excellent, smooth like Thai sail, I would say that. But since then, ASEAN-China relations have faced certain difficulty ups and down roller coaster of sort because of the development, as what the survey said in South China Sea mainly. But now there are a lot more questions. Number two, which I like to focus on, is the quality of the ASEAN-China relation, which the survey have not yet go into detail. I think in the future, we must look into the qualities. This is why the issue related to environmental issue remain. So I think this is an important issue that will dictate the trajectories of ASEAN's future relations. Number three, this survey is unique because you talk a lot of students, and I was surprised to find out that the majorities of young people view positively the future of ASEAN relation. Since Thailand, young people have a very different attitudes toward ASEAN-China relation. They are much more negative because of the domestic development within Thailand, always linked to a broader ASEAN-China relations. So I think much more study is needed, survey is needed on this area toward student life. And I think the majorities of students, which I believe from Indonesia, have a very positive view. My suggestion is this: I think in the future, China has to pay more attention to, as the survey suggests, on the last part, the so-called people-to-people's exchange, particularly on the roles of civil society organization. China must pay more attention to this because it will have greater impact. G2G, no problems, because I think all the government officials understand the importance of China in the fields of politics, economics. Everybody knows that now ASEAN has become #1 trader with China, replacing EU. Everybody knows that Chinese vaccine, it's very important. It's helping us try to return speedier to faster economic recovery in the post-pandemic. But we have to work harder on the people-to-people in the areas of civil society, which I think China is still lagging behind. I would like to end my assessment here, but it's very important to wait and see what is the ASEAN leader decision, whether to upgrade strategic partnership next week or defer further, because it will indicate to you whether our survey is correct or not, that ASEAN look beyond the Cold War psyche in managing the relation with major power. If ASEAN defer, China requests for comprehensive strategic partnership later on, it means we still stuck with the Cold War mentality. At least our leader continue to do that. If we agree to say yes, then we go beyond that. But then there's another question, because Australia, which headline news this day, with Malaysia, with Indonesia, because tripartite security alignments. If ASEAN also agree to promote strategic partnership to comprehensive for Australia, it means that China and Australia, the coupling of their relations, have influence in our thinking, in our relation with the US. So we have to watch closely what would be the decision. Thank you so much. I will end here.
Thank you, Mr. Kavi Chongkitaphorn, for your thought-provoking opinion regarding the main findings of the survey. But now let's discuss more detailed aspect of the findings. I think one of the important findings of the survey shows that many see, especially the more than 51% of the respondents believe that China as a solution provider for all the challenges faced by ASEAN, especially as we can see from the way we handling the COVID-19 and its recovery. And furthermore, 46% of the respondents also perceive that China is a reliable partner for development assistance and aid. However, as Dr. Sofwan mentioned also earlier, that the respondents also demand China to respect the norms and also the principles in the region, such as non-interference, and then treating ASEAN members more equally while playing more active and also positive role in the region. I guess this is the part where Dr. Sofwan mentioned the compartmentalize of the dimensions of this, the result of the survey. So I would like to again request Professor Lin Wei to give your opinion regarding this, what I think Dr. Sofwan mentioned as the compartmentalized dimensions of the result of the survey. Please, Professor Lin Wei.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to make 3 points. First, I really like the idea of compartmentalization. So first of all, by such a wording, we mean that we should never simplify China-ASEAN relations or ever simplify or have the simplify. So we need to not only conduct cooperation differently in various fields, but also we need to remind ourselves that such a relationship is situated in the multiplex world. So we know that the world order, it is situated in the multiplex world, and it is situated in a network of relationship ASEAN enjoys with other partners, which is also defined by the report saying that it is multi-layered and balanced. So this is, I think just now my colleague Ms. Lockman also emphasized the complexity of such a relationship. And secondly, I want to discuss power and responsibility. Well, it is very interesting to see that, about 40% of the respondents saying that China should be more active in providing solutions to regional problems. And it is interesting to see that in the Myanmar case, top 4 answers are that the first is to condemn, second is to send a special envoy, third to support ASEAN responses, and the fourth is non-interference. It is very interesting. You can see that the people are quite divided in terms of what kind of role China should play in actually a domestic issue, which has regional influence. So the question is how to measure Chinese power and how to define Chinese power, and to what extent shall China use its power and how to use its power. All these questions need to be discussed, and maybe we cannot come to immediate conclusion. We cannot have immediate solution. But I think one of the reasons that China proposes a comprehensive strategic partner is because that the relationship has developed to a certain stage that leaders, China and ASEAN leaders, need to consult on those strategic issues so that we can better meet the challenges of today. So China can play a more expected active role in the region to deal with geopolitical challenges, to deal with regional security, political security challenges, and also in areas where China's role is expected. So all these need to be, I think, to be a solution provider, it is a very delicate issue, and it has to be consulted, and it has to be, decided or on consensus, based on consensus. I really like the ASEAN idea of consensus building. And then finally, about the, I think it is also mentioned in the report a lot of diversity, not only diversity among different countries, but also diversity among different groups. So we also need to, the policies need also to be tailor-made. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ling Wei. Dr. Lokman, Mr. Lokman, would you like to elaborate further the one that you mentioned earlier that the relation is so complicated? So probably you can elaborate further that point.
Right. So essentially is this. I think something I'm not sure whether that was the year I first met Prof. Ling Wei. I don't know. But this was when President Obama, US President Obama at the time, criticized China for being a free rider. Maybe it was 2012, I forget, or 2014. And I remember how the Chinese were really, really upset. I was in Beijing at the time, and they made sure that they were determined, I think, at the time to show that Obama was wrong. And I think China has gone a long way towards becoming a provider of intellectual public goods, especially in Southeast Asia. But at the same time, its growth has also complicated matters with regards to its sea power and so on and so forth. I think this is a natural growth spurt or natural consequence of the rise of any major power. You are going to have those kinds of complications in any case. And so we need to be able to deal with those contradictions. It's apparently in Vietnam, it is often said that the best possible leader for Vietnam is someone who can stand up to China and get along with China at the same time. To do two exactly contradictory things, right? You stand up to China, get along with China. Maybe that is said in two stark terms, but I think in a way, that is what we should expect of ASEAN leaders as well. Get along with China, get along as well as possible. But when it comes to things that matter to the core interests of ASEAN countries, especially things to do with territorial integrity, sovereignty, so on and so forth, domestic politics, I think the line needs to be drawn. And I think the results show this, that there is a desire for people in the ASEAN region, for their leaders, in a way, in their responses, I hope also reflects a bit about their expectations for their governments, that they expect ASEAN leaders to go all out, cooperate with China on the post-pandemic recovery, go all out with China on vaccines, go all out with China on technology issues, 5G, so on and so forth, but draw a line as well. I think that's very clear, and I think the Malaysian result to me was clear as well. That was the balance I thought that I heard from the Malaysian results, although it was more anxiety than I expected.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lokman. Now I would like to invite Mr. Kavi Chongkitavorn. Would you like to elaborate further? Earlier, the one that you mentioned. You mentioned
Okay,
earlier, yeah, you mentioned that no surprises at all from the result.
You see, ASEAN has 10 member countries. Each country has different image, perceptions of China. It can be divided, as the survey have said, into 3 groups. Those are very favorable to China, and those who are a little bit negative, and then those in the middle. Thailand, Malaysia, those are in the middle. And I want to focus on Thailand and Malaysia because these 2 countries has the highest capacity to engage and manage the relation with China. And no other country can manage and handle China relations as adroit as Malaysia. Malaysia has the best, it can alter contract with China without any punishment. No other country has done that. That show you the capacity, what I would say, the strength of Malaysia in engaging China. So China, as the survey said, most of is a positive contributor to solve the problem within ASEAN. Of course, you have the ongoing COC. I hope that there will be a progress on the COC before the special ASEAN-China Summit on November 22nd with President Xi Jinping will preside over. This is an extraordinary years because you have two summits. The summit next week that Brunei will host, ASEAN summit, and then you have this special summit with Xi Jinping, President, will host on the November 22nd. There must be some progress over the COC. Otherwise, it would be difficult to report on the evolution that take 20 years to negotiate. And the other issue that our panel is talking about, the multiplex, very complex, yes, especially on the situation of Myanmar. The role of China is extremely important, not to mention the United States, along with ASEAN. ASEAN will play the central role, and we need full support from both China and the United States in helping to find durable solution. And I think I'm glad that so far a lot of complaint about ASEAN role, but ASEAN is still firm that it will proceed as stated in 5-point consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kafi. I think since we have only limited time, I would like to invite each panelist to have a concluding remark, probably each of you 1 to 2 minutes, then for the overview and then the concluding remark for the survey. Please, I would like to invite first Professor Ling Wei, and then Mr. Lokman, and then Mr. Kafi.
Okay, thank you very much. Finally, I would like to conclude by emphasizing people-to-people exchanges. I have been teaching at universities for over 20 years, and I've got involved in East Asian studies for close to 20 years. So over the years, I've seen by myself the growth of Chinese students' interest in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, and in the region in general. So I think it is a very, just last month, I attended a youth summit hosted by Peking University, and which is lasted for about a week. So young students from China, from all 10 ASEAN countries, they gathered either on site or via internet, discussing regional issues. So I think such a kind of, I truly hope that student exchange between China and ASEAN could resume very soon. I think this is our future, and we should facilitate such exchanges. And also, I really appreciate all the efforts of FPCI in producing such a, the report, the survey and the report. I sincerely hope that such work will continue next year. It better not only helps the ASEAN people understand China, better understand China, but also help Chinese better understand how China is perceived in the region, and how, to what extent, China should, improve its approaches and its policies, and tailor-make its policies in different countries and different areas in the region. So so these actually, I think, both work will facilitate better understanding among the two sides. And I, again, want to emphasize that China-ASEAN relationship is a key to regional order in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ling Wei. Please, Mr. Lokman, yes?
So I would like to echo what Prof. Ling Wei said about people-to-people relations. This has been the longest time that, at least for me, I've gone without a visit to China where I would be able to talk to my friends in various think tanks and all that. It's different when it's on Zoom. You don't get your best conversations are not actually during the sessions. It's when you have coffee outside and you exchange gossip, and very, very good gossip as well. But this is actually quite damaging to the study of China. Actually, this whole pandemic, and not being able to have links between discussions, in-person discussions between academics, think tanks, track 2, so on and so forth. So yeah, I very much look forward to that resumption of that interaction as the world returns to some semblance of normality. The second point I would like to make is this, that unfortunately, whatever it is, ASEAN-China, we do not, on the ASEAN side, we do not we do not control all the elements. There is also the element of great power competition. I take note that the ambassador he's very eloquently said, China is aware of how important it is and seeks to moderate tensions. But I do worry about the long-term trajectory. It does seem as if the two countries have reached the stage where they have started to see each other as they've started to see certain aspects of the relationship as irreconcilable. I'm not talking about the business side, I'm talking mostly on the military competition and all that. It's almost come to that stage. I'm not saying it's already there. And so that will have a very dramatic impact and would call for very serious leadership from ASEAN. I fear for next year. I fear for next year's chairmanship. I hope next year's chairmanship does not result with another 2012. But at the same time, I'm also looking forward to the chairmanship the year after, which is Indonesia. And I hope Indonesia will show a lot more leadership and be able to moderate things. And of course, when Indonesia is chair, I hope you will take notice of the results of the FPCI surveys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lokman. Please, Mr. Kafi.
I will be very short. I think the most important things for ASEAN-China relation now is the communication strategy. We have to work together because we don't have our own narrative. Our narrative is just copied from outside. So we don't have our own. We lack the capacity to write our own impression about China's, about ASEAN. So we relied on others. So this is the most important thing. And I agree with Lin Wei's suggestion that there should be more communication, explanation, access. Chinese leaders should give interviews to ASEAN journalists. But none of that happens, So there must be regular briefing, access to information for our regionals, There are more Chinese journalists in the region. We do not have regional journalists in China because it's very expensive, it's difficult. That kinds of thing we need to work that out so that we have a new narrative that reflects the realities of real ASEAN-China relation from the next 25 years. The second diamond years, that's what we call. Thank you.
Thank you for all the panelists for your assessment and also enrich our understanding about ASEAN and China relations. Now we will begin taking questions from the audience since we have those who are in Zoom and those who are in YouTube. I think for those on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. And if I call out your name, please briefly introduce yourself and be mindful to be concise in raising your question. But then for those on YouTube, please write your question in YouTube chat box and we will read out your question for you. Please, okay. Chris Daniel, the one that I noticed to raise hand. Please, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself briefly and raise your question?
Thank you. I hope my voice is clear. My name is Chris. I'm not from any institution, but I'm from the public viewer, public participant of this session. I would like to ask Professor Lin Wei if earlier you mentioned the last response you gave that it is important, it is necessary for for ASEAN and also for China to escalate their cooperation and connection through people to people. I would like, is it also possible that it could be implemented in a way of exchange programs or student projects that involve both ASEAN students, youth, and also Chinese youth and students? Thank you.
Professor Lin Wei, is it clear to you, the question from Daniel?
Yeah, so it's about China-ASEAN student exchange, right? But what exactly is the question? I think we have a lot of ongoing student exchange programs between China and ASEAN. And actually that is, I think it's one of the flagship cooperation between China and ASEAN. But because of the COVID-19, because of the pandemic, some programs have been suspended. So I think we need to resume the exchange programs soon.
Thank you, Professor Ling Wei. Now I would like to read the questions taken from YouTube. The first question is from Satrio Santoso, alumni of Ateneo de Davao University. But the question I think is to Ambassador Teng Sijun. Is it possible to also address the question? I would like to ask Steffi first. Is it okay to ask the question to the ambassador? Otherwise, I would like to read another question. This is the question from Albert Lee. What are China's plans for the West Philippine Sea in the future that will benefit the ASEAN community? Is it possible to raise those questions? Steffi, are you
Sorry,
there?
Dr. Poppy, it seems Ambassador Teng Sijun has already left.
Okay, okay. All right, so I just keep those questions because the questions are for the ambassador. So now I would like to ask the question to the panelists. Well, the question is, how can China assure its commitment for peace and stability in Southeast Asia while developing its military infrastructure and presence, having its vessels roaming around Southeast Asian countries? I think this is one of the aspects that we have discussed earlier, how the ambiguity of the perceptions of the people in ASEAN, seeing how then in terms of the military, in terms of the geopolitical aspects, it seems like it's more alarming. However, in terms of the economic cooperations, it seems more welcoming. I would like to invite Mr. Kafi, Professor Ling Wei, and also Professor Lokman, Mr. Lokman, is it? Please, Mr. Kafi first, and then Professor Ling Wei.
Could you repeat? Could you repeat the questions again?
Okay.
Because I cannot hear you fully.
Okay. The question is, how can China assure its commitment for peace and stability in Southeast Asia while developing its military infrastructure and presence, having its vessels roaming around Southeast Asian countries? I think the Satrio Santoso is asking your opinion from the panelists regarding this kind of situation. Would you like to respond to that, Mr. Kafi?
Well, the only ways to secure that is to make sure that China and ASEAN leaders have dialogue as it is today. So it's very important. That is why China has asked ASEAN to alleviate its status as comprehensive strategic dialogue so that it can increase trust deficit. That I would answer this question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kafi. Professor Ling Wei, would you like to also respond to that question?
Yeah, I agree. But I also would want to emphasize that for China should continue to invest in Southeast Asia. So as long as China become increasingly a stakeholder in the region, and then as Ambassador Deng said in his opening remarks that China knows too well that any, we should not disrupt or derail the regional process, because such a disruption would eventually disrupt China's own course of development. So I think continue to invest in Southeast Asia is a very important is very important. And also I agree that we need more communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ling Wei. I would like to invite Mr. Sahriman Lokman.
Okay. Thank you. Look, I think a certain amount of friction is inevitable. I mean, China genuinely, truly, deeply believes that it has sovereign rights, sovereignty over certain sections of waters that are also claimed by Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, Vietnam. So there is an inevitability that there's this friction. What's required is that for us to have, certain understandings between these militaries so that those kinds of interactions do not escalate beyond a certain level. So yeah, I think we have to live with a certain amount of tension, certain amount of friction. What is required is predictability in the sort of behavior. That we know that if you're going to send a survey ship, this is what it's going to do. These are the ships that will accompany it, and we know what kinds of that we know that this belongs to government, this does not belong to government, so on and so forth. The trouble is if you have gray sort of areas where you have certain fishing vessels that are also acting as militia, then that will be problematic. I also acknowledge that China claims that there is no such distinction in its system, but never mind. So yeah, my answer is slightly pessimistic, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lokman. I see Chobing is raising hand. Would you like to introduce yourself and unmute it yourself?
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you for oops, okay. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. And I see a lot of friends here. My question is actually for Wei Ling. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
See you. Over the years, we have seen a number of Southeast Asian surveys towards China. I think the work done by the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, IC Singapore also has done so. And in some individual Southeast Asian countries, they also have certain surveys of their own countries' views towards China. I think in Philippines and in Malaysia and some other parts also. So we have quite a number of this kind of data already. And then I think they will continue, which I think are very useful. But I'm just wondering how Chinese look at Southeast Asia. I have not seen much of this kind of studies, opinion, surveys that coming out from China regarding views towards the region, Southeast Asia, and so on and so forth. Is there any chance that perhaps on the China side that some kind of this kind of studies can be conducted, perhaps among your students to begin with? So that's just my questions, or perhaps comments or things like that. Thank you.
Please, Professor Ling Wei.
Well, thank you. Very nice to meet you here on this seminar. Well, I think it is true that we've seen surveys done by different parties on how China is perceived in Southeast Asia. However, vice versa, we don't really see much the survey, done in China. And it's a good suggestion that I probably will when I go back to classroom, I will ask my students I will conduct a survey among students of mine, or among at least probably I can work with my colleagues and see if we can conduct survey, since there is really a growing community of not only students, but also young scholars, in especially they have become increasingly interested in Southeast Asia. So at least we can conduct survey, among these people and see how Southeast Asia is perceived. Thank you very much, Dr. Rao, for your suggestion.
I just want to say thank you. I feel encouraged by this answer. I really look forward to any results coming out from the surveys that you and your colleagues will do. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to read out the question from YouTube. It's from Xu Chenhua, the paper, which is based in Shanghai. The question is to all the speakers. If you would like to respond, please do so. The question is, the immigrant workers from China are important in Southeast Asia economy for their capacity and skills. However, it has been shaped as a threat to the local economy through social media and political discourse. How can we respond to it, and how can we protect the rights of these laborers? I would like to invite first Mr. Lokman to respond to this, and then Mr. Kavi, and then Professor Ling Wei.
Look, I think the treatment of Chinese labor differs from one country to the other. I think in some of the more developed middle income countries of Southeast Asia, there is actually no groundswell of opinion against Chinese labor simply because they are not taking local jobs. They are substitute for workers from other countries. So in Malaysia, we substitute for for labor from, say, Bangladesh and so forth. I think in general, those are matters of general treatment of labor, foreign labor, rather than Chinese labor per se. And generally speaking, I think, well, I've not heard very much complaints about it. The complication comes when it is in, say, I know, when perhaps, forgive me for saying, where in Indonesia, for example, where it is slightly more complicated, where there is a sense that Chinese labor is substitute for local labor, right? That's actual direct competition, and that is a matter that can blow up quite quickly. And I think on that score, I think the Indonesian government will probably have to respond to the domestic sentiment, which is to use local labor. I think I mean, at the same time, you have to acknowledge that Chinese labor, more often than not, because they are operating for Chinese construction companies, are more attuned to what's required of the bosses. So I mean, it's a very complicated situation. I think, look, there is no single South Asian answer for it. The answers reside actually at the national level, and it's far too complicated to go into all 10 countries at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Lokman, for your response. Mr. Kafi, would you like to respond to that question too?
Well, we don't have problems with Chinese labor because we don't need them. We have migrant workers from abundance from Myanmar. We have almost 6 million of them informally, and then we have a large number also from Cambodia and also from Laos. Of course, I think the questions focus on the Chinese worker under the infrastructure project. It probably related to the situation in Laos or in East Timor, but not in the case of Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kafi. Professor Lin Wei, would you like to respond to that question as well?
I don't really. So are we discussing Chinese workers in Southeast Asia? What specifically is the question? I didn't really get that very clearly.
Oh, okay. I think the question is about how then the perceptions and also the response from the Southeast Asian people regarding the laborers coming from China who are seen as the threat for their local economy. So, and then at the same time, these laborers are seen as skillful and also how to protect these laborers. So the question is about that aspect. Would you like to?
I think it is quite a complicated issue. Well, from the Chinese perspective, I think the attention people would, in China, we would often discuss, how to improve the conditions on the working side, how to improve the working conditions for those people, and how to provide consular protection for these people. So I think, there is a gap between Chinese people and also people in Southeast Asia. So again, we need really talk to each other and see where the problem really is, and then try to solve them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Lin Wei. I see. Okay, Odi Bagus, would you like to raise your question? Please be brief.
Thank you very much, Ms. Poppy. My name is Odi Bagus Saputra. Currently, I'm taking a master program in Universitas Gadjah Mada. I'm a student of Poppy, actually. So my question is point out for Mr. Sahriman Lokman and Kafi, Mr. Kafi, I mean. I just want to know your opinion. As we know, our region is under competitions between US and China. My question is about what's the best way for ASEAN countries to, in some way, take balanced actions for China, but in some way we have to maintain our cooperations with China, particularly for vaccines. Is that any possible for us to build kind of pharmacy industry? As we can see, for a pandemic, it's not only stop in COVID, but in the future maybe we can face another pandemic like bigger of COVID. So I think for me, it's very important if we develop our own pharmacy industry. Thank you.
Okay, I think the question addressed to Mr. Lokman and Mr. Kafi. Would you like to respond to that question?
Well, Poppy, it shows that you're a very, very good teacher from judging for the question. Can I ask Pak Kavi to answer first? I think his wisdom is more useful here.
Oh, no. Okay. It's very interesting if you're talking about research in vaccine. America has done long time ago, over 5 decades, with country like Thailand, and recently it has set up a center in Vietnam. But in the future, I think collaboration between China and the rest of ASEAN will be very important, particularly with Indonesia, because Indonesia wants to produce its own vaccine. At the moment, as you know, Thailand has been able to produce its own vaccine under license of AstraZeneca since December last year and has been exporting to neighboring country. This collaboration is very important. And ASEAN, being ASEAN, will not choose side. We want both America and China. This is why you have country like Thailand, which has a long established relation with United States. And then you have Indonesia, which is now trying to approach China. There's other country, for example, Vietnam. Vietnam has been able to collaborate with Russia to produce Sputnik 5 already. So as you can see, ASEAN, being ASEAN, will try to manage their relations to all major power equally if they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kafi. Mr. Lokman, would you like to respond to that question?
Odi, thank you for the question. It is actually a very tough question, and I hope that your generation would have a lot more wisdom in answering that. But my very short answer to your very complicated question is to avoid the temptation of simplifying things, to avoid the temptation to see things in black and white terms, and to avoid the temptation to making assumptions about countries, making assumptions that certain countries will dominate this region from here on to the future. I think I think the best way for us moving forward is to keep insisting that our relationship can continue to be compartmentalized, just like the survey results show. I also think that I understand this is not going to be very welcome by our Chinese friends, but I think there is a role for South Asia to continue engaging other extra-regional countries to make sure that they have a stake in this region, and therefore making sure that that certain countries are kept honest. And so I think a confluence of interests, a confluence of forces, I think is required here. I'm sorry to say things that are very uncomfortable for our Chinese friends, but I truly believe that, and I hope that we will continue to deal with this contradiction in a flexible way. Yeah, I think not choosing sides is still viable in the long run. People disagree with me, but I think yeah, we can continue engaging other countries, a confluence of a constellation of other countries to balance things out. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Lokman, for your response. I'm afraid due to our time limitation, we cannot accept any more questions. Icha, my apologies that I cannot give you any time for you to raise your questions. And also we actually still have several questions from YouTube. Unfortunately, we cannot address those questions due to the limited time. Thank you again for all the panelists and everyone for posing very exciting questions and contributing to our fruitful discussion. Unfortunately, again, we have to end the session due to time constraint, and my apologies that we cannot take all the questions. Thank you again for the panelists. And I think I'll hand over the floor back to Steffi. Steffi, are you there? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Poppy, and thank you to all panelists. It was such a great and lively discussion. I am sure all of us here find it very interesting and useful. Thank you as well to all participants who have joined us in our ASEAN-China Survey Report launching event. The official survey report will be sent to each participant's email who joined us today. In addition, we also would like to invite all participants to join our Telegram group chat. We will share up-to-date news, analysis, op-eds, and any updates relating to ASEAN-China affairs. Everyone is free to express their views and opinion in the group, since it is aimed to facilitate an academic and intellectual discussion. We hope that through this, we could promote closer ties among relevant stakeholders in the region, namely among policymakers, academic communities, students, both in the region as well as between our region and China. Apologies, it seems there seems to be a technical issue. We're trying to share the screen. Please wait a moment. Sorry for the technical issue. Let me just continue. Furthermore, it is my great pleasure to inform everyone here that our biggest annual foreign policy conference, the Global Town Hall, will be held next month on Saturday, 20 November 2021. The Global Town Hall is a marathon 14-hour online discussions that will involve leading minds from multiple countries. We're inviting great names and leading figures to speak at the Global Town Hall, so make sure to register yourself at www.gth2021.com. We have now come to the end of today's event. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to FPCI social media handles for more information about our activities, upcoming events, and programs. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye and see you at FPCI's other future events.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, the committee. Can you please share the Telegram link on the chat box, please? Thank you.
To all panelists, may I ask you to please stay behind? It seems we have a technical issues here.